Hi, my name is Shay McGlynn, and I'm an athletic trainer and strength and conditioning coach for a professional hockey team out of Texas. I've been given some questions to answer about the nutritional aspects with our athletes. So the first one we're going to talk about is just overall health as far as nutrition goes to maximize performance. Also with regards to healing as well for us. So for sure we want to focus on replenishing whatever was lost during a practice or a game, especially when we play back-to-back nights, so 2 games in a row essentially. We want to make sure we replenish their energy stores, of course. We will give them a bit of protein, just like any other exercise. There might be some muscle damage just from the act of exercise, and rebuilding any torn muscle from the exercise process, we for sure want to make sure we're not having a catabolic effect or a muscular breakdown. We usually do use animal proteins, but also we do have some athletes, which we'll talk about a little more later on, but who are vegan. So we'll have options like beans, rice does have a little bit of protein, quinoa, things of that sort. Carbohydrates are really important in that sense, as many of you know, for replenishing the actual energy storage portion of it. And then we want some healthy fats. Usually we'll have some vegetables that are cooked a little bit in olive oil. For snacks, we give them a lot of assorted nuts, some stuff like that, that'll have healthy fats, a good combination of carbs, protein, and fat with those sort of snacks. But we have a full meal after games for them. I know the guys will be eating a little bit late at 11 o'clock sometimes, but it's really important for the next day, for when we have the next game, that all that energy gets kind of put back into their body to have a full gas tank to use for the next day. Another question, as I kind of touched on earlier, is talking about diets of our athletes. Especially nowadays, there's a wide variety, and we kind of have to account for all of that. There's a lot more allergies these days, but also we have a lot more players who are vegetarian, vegan, things like that. Some people think it would be a little bit more difficult to handle. I personally don't think it's that difficult as far as getting all the essential vitamins, nutrients, proteins for athletes that are vegan. You just kind of got to do your research on it and be smart about it. We have plenty of guys who try not to eat meat, but they will still eat fish, so that makes it a lot easier for us in that aspect. We try and push lean meats on them anyways, so grilled chicken, turkey. We're going to do some different assorted fishes. We try to avoid more of the red meats as far as, pork, steak, things of that sort. But we definitely want to accompany everyone's wishes as far as what their diet restrictions are, and some just do it for their own health benefits, as more and more players we're actually seeing and professional athletes are vegan, which to be honest, personally, I think is great. We just have to be a little bit more creative with what we give them to kind of get all their proteins. We touched on like the beans earlier, stuff like that. We do a lot more vegetables that we push on our athletes in general. We kind of have a rule where we want 3/4 of the plate to be more fruits and vegetables, and only smaller portions of protein for our athletes, and hopefully lean proteins. An example of a typical pregame meal, we'll usually have the players eat about 4 to 5 hours before the game. So if we play at 7 o'clock, they would be eating around 2 p.m. And it's going to be just a variety is really important for us. We'll give them a lot of options for the guys that do have diet restrictions or have personal diet restrictions by choice. But they're always going to have a salad bar. We do the typical pasta. We'll have gluten-free options. We usually go for whole wheat as opposed to regular white pasta. And there'll be quinoa, rice. We'll give them a lean protein like a grilled chicken typically. And then they also will usually have a fruit spread, an assortment of vegetables for them, since we're trying to push that to have a well-balanced nutrients, vitamins, minerals, all that for essential brain health and just optimal performance in general. All that's really important. As far as running into issues with deficiencies, we're fortunate enough that we are able to do lab work for our players in preseason. During our training camp, we'll kind of do blood samples and test for an array of things. A lot of people, the most common one we see is vitamin D deficiencies. A lot of our players are from Canada, Northern America, or even Europe, and a lot of those guys are coming from areas that don't have sun 24/7. We're lucky in Texas that we do, so we actually see guys get better as far as vitamin D throughout the season just because of the fortunate, we're lucky to have so much sun in Texas, but we do supplement with that sometimes. It is important for vitamin D as far as it is really important for bone health and how your body uses calcium. One side note on that is a lot of people know that calcium is good for your bones, but what a lot of people don't know is that it's really important for muscle contraction. calcium has to be released into your muscles essentially for it to contract properly. So it is really important for that calcium to be absorbed and used by your body the proper way. Especially, we have to be creative a little bit with some of our vegan athletes, like we talked about earlier. So we'll supplement with vitamins and things like that if guys are deficient, but we try to do it as much as we can through natural food as opposed to supplements. And that leads me to my last question, my thoughts on supplements and how we use them with our athletes. So the big spiel that I give to our players is that we have a specific regulatory process or brands that we use that have quality assurance or quality testing. So the FDA in the United States doesn't look over supplements as far as their safety or efficacy, in the sense that there is an ingredient list on these supplements, but they might not be accurate, and there's risk with consuming these. And that's really unfortunate in the United States. I say it in the United States because Canada, they actually do have their FDA run regulation on all supplements, so you have a better assurance that they're cleaner. But unfortunately, without any sort of quality assurance company testing the supplements, it's really difficult to tell if they're clean, safe, and even if what the ingredient list shows is what's truly in the supplement, because no one's testing these supplements and making sure they're being accurate with what actually is being served to the general public. So we're pretty strict on what the athletes are allowed to take. Obviously, we do have drug testing in professional sports, so that's something we have to be really conscious of. But I try and be a little bit more natural with my athletes, and two supplements I want to talk about as far as athletes are tart cherry juice and beet juice. We buy these either in pre-made shakes or powdered form. Tart cherry juice is actually really good for recovery from an exercise or a sport activity. It has a lot of elements. It is also high in carbohydrate, but it has a lot of anti-inflammatory elements. So if you were to have an exercise, and a lot of us know that there's typically some micro tearing, especially with more vigorous exercise, we want to rebuild that with protein, but it also creates an inflammatory response, which we need to happen, but we don't want it to last terribly long, right? We don't want a lot of extra fluid in our body. And we want everything to be healed as quickly as possible. So tart cherry juice is a really great carbohydrate source, but it's also really good for anti-inflammatory foods. Beet juice has been shown to have really good extended time to fatigue, so we will have them take it before practices and games, and they actually have to be on it for at least 5 days for it to technically work, according to medical research. And we'll use that to extend their time to fatigue, so hopefully in the end of a game for us in hockey with the third period, they'll be having higher energy levels than our opposing team late in the game, when, especially if the game's on the line, to try and edge out a couple extra wins there. And then last thing I'm going to touch on is just anti-inflammatory foods versus pro-inflammatory foods. Just in general, we try and get our athletes to eat as clean as possible. So what we want to avoid is obviously the fried foods, the high sugar processed foods, things of that sort, and way more fruits and vegetables that are going to help us have a lower inflammatory balance in our body, if that all makes sense. But I hope all this was helpful, and thanks for your time.